In the 41st millennium, there are no more gods to kill, or so the Imperium believes. The Emperor sits entombed upon his golden throne, sustained by 1,000 psychic sacrifices daily, while the Chaos Gods writhe in the warp, forever hungry and forever denied. Into this stalemate of divine powers, something impossible arrived. A man who had ended pantheons, toppled Olympus, and walked away from godhood itself. Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, god-killer and father, fell screaming through a tear in reality that should not exist. The blades of chaos burned hot against his forearms as he plummeted through the screaming void between dimensions. The World Tree had opened a path. Mimir had warned him the branches touched realms beyond even Odin's knowledge. But Kratos had not expected this. The passage felt wrong, corrupt. Where the pathways between the 9 realms hummed with ancient magic, this tunnel shrieked with the voices of billions, their faith and desperation creating a psychic maelstrom that battered against his consciousness. Then, impact. Kratos smashed through the stained glass dome of the cathedral of his eternal majesty on the shrine world of Ophelia 7. Shards of colored glass, each piece depicting the Emperor's countless victories, exploded outward as the Spartan's body carved a crater into the marble floor. The Leviathan axe, still gripped in his left hand, had taken the brunt of the landing. Frost spread across the shattered stone in crystalline patterns. The blades of chaos, chained to his soul across lifetimes and realities, coiled protectively around his forearms, their hellfire sputtering in this strange new atmosphere. He rose slowly, joints popping, muscles adjusting. The air tasted of incense and something else, burning metal, old blood, and the acrid stench of what he'd learned to recognize as fanatic devotion. The cathedral around him stretched upward into impossible heights. Gothic architecture, of a scale that would have impressed even Zeus, loomed overhead. Statues of a golden figure, armored, regal, holding a flaming sword, gazed down from every alcove and column. "Daemon!" The scream came from a robed figure near the altar, his face pale beneath an elaborate hat adorned with the same golden figure's iconography. "Daemon in the holy sanctum! The Emperor's wrath be upon you!" Kratos said nothing. He'd heard similar proclamations before, from priests of gods he'd later killed. His gray skin marked with the ashes of his murdered family, and his red tattoo earned gasps from the dozen other robed figures scrambling for cover. The warrior's cold gaze swept the cathedral, assessing threats and exits. His body still thrummed with the aftershock of dimensional travel, but his weapons were ready. The doors burst open. Soldiers, if they could be called that, flooded in wearing armor of deep crimson and obsidian, carrying guns that hummed with barely contained energy. Their movements were disciplined, their weapons trained with the precision of veterans, but their eyes held the same fanatical gleam as the priests. "By the authority of the God Emperor of mankind, you are declared anathema. Surrender or be purged." Kratos' jaw tightened. Another empire, another regime demanding submission in the name of gods and glory. His fingers flexed around the Leviathan axe's handle. The weapon sang with frost magic, eager to taste new blood. "I kill to no one," Kratos growled, his voice like grinding stone. The lead soldier made a hand signal. 20 lasguns opened fire. The beams of coherent light, strange weapons that burned rather than pierced, lanced toward the Spartan. Kratos moved, not with supernatural speed, but with the economy of motion earned through millennia of combat. The Leviathan axe swept upward, its edge somehow deflecting 3 laser beams in a shower of sparks. He rolled left, the blades of chaos uncoiling with serpentine grace to wrap around a statue's base. With a yank, he launched himself skyward as the marble floor where he'd stood exploded under concentrated fire. He landed among them like a descending storm. The axe cleaved through the first soldier's chest plate, some kind of advanced ceramic that nevertheless shattered like pottery under God-forged steel. Frost spread from the wound, crystallizing blood before it could spill. The blades of chaos whipped out, wrapping around another soldier's lasgun and ripping it from his grip before reversing to tear through his throat. These warriors were skilled. They adjusted their formation, tried to create crossfire, shouted orders in a language Kratos didn't understand, but understood through context. They died anyway. Not because they were weak. Kratos could feel their training, see their discipline, but because they faced something their experience had not prepared them for. A god-killer operated on a different level of violence. Every movement had purpose. Every strike ended a life. No wasted motion, no mercy. The cathedral floor became a massacre ground. Bodies in crimson armor littered the sacred space, their blood somehow too bright, as if infused with something beyond mere hemoglobin, pooling beneath shattered statues of the golden god. The lead soldier, grievously wounded, dragged himself toward the altar, speaking into a communication device built into his helmet. "Daemon, incursion, Cathedral Prime, send the—" Kratos's boot crushed the device. He looked down at the dying soldier, saw fear and hatred warring in his eyes, saw something else too, absolute conviction. This soldier believed his God would save him, would punish this transgressor, would make everything right. Kratos had seen that look before, in Sparta, in Athens, in the eyes of those who'd worshipped the Olympians. "Your God is not here," Kratos said simply. The soldier's reply came as a blood-flecked whisper. "The Emperor protects." Then he died. Kratos straightened, breathing controlled despite the exertion. The cathedral had fallen silent, except for the whimpering of hiding priests. He looked up at the nearest statue of this emperor, studying the figure's stern features, the crown of laurels, the flaming sword held aloft. Another tyrant god demanding worship, another divine power structure built on the backs of those who suffered under it. The blades of chaos flickered, their flames responding to his rising anger. How many worlds had he walked where gods proclaimed themselves righteous while mortals bled for their vanity? How many times must he— Another sound interrupted his thoughts. Chanting, growing louder, the very air began to vibrate with power, not magic as he knew it, but something else. Psychic energy, raw and barely controlled, channeling through hundreds of throats in unison. The priests had stopped hiding. They stood now, arms raised, eyes rolled back, voices merging into a single overwhelming litany. The Emperor protects, the Emperor provides, the Emperor judges. Bring forth his wrath upon the unclean. Burn the daemon, cleanse the heretic, purge the— The doors exploded inward. Something massive crossed the threshold. Kratos' eyes narrowed as he beheld the new arrivals, warriors in power armor so thick they moved like walking fortresses, each one nearly 8 feet tall, their armor adorned with skulls, purity seals, and the same golden emblems as the statues. But their eyes gave Kratos pause. These were not mortal eyes. These warriors had been made into something more, sculpted by genetic engineering and indoctrination into living weapons. Space Marines, the angels of death, the Emperor's finest. Their leader stepped forward, a massive chainsaw idling in his grip, its teeth cycling with a hungry whine. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute certainty of one who had never questioned his purpose. I am Brother Sergeant Mordrin of the Blood Angels, 3rd Company. You have desecrated holy ground and slain the Emperor's faithful. For these crimes there is only one sentence: death. Chainsword revved to full fury. Death. Kratos rolled his shoulders, feeling his divine essence stirring beneath mortal flesh. The Spartan rage, that gift and curse that had defined his existence, began to simmer in his chest. These warriors, enhanced, armored, fanatical, would be a true test. Good. He raised the Leviathan axe and let the blades of chaos hang ready at his sides. Then come, Kratos said. Let me show you what happens to those who serve false gods. The Space Marines charged as one, and the ghost of Sparta met them in the heart of a cathedral dedicated to a god he did not recognize, in a universe he did not understand, beginning a war that would shake the foundations of the 41st millennium itself. The chainsword met the Leviathan axe with a scream of tortured metal. Brother Sergeant Mordrin was fast, faster than any mortal had right to be, but Kratos had fought gods. The Spartan twisted, redirecting the chainsword's momentum while the blades of chaos lashed out like striking serpents. The chains wrapped around another Space Marine's bolter, yanking the weapon skyward just as it fired. The explosive round, a miniature rocket that detonated on impact, blew apart a section of cathedral ceiling, raining Gothic stonework down on the battlefield. Kratos fought like a man who had perfected violence across multiple lifetimes. He used the Space Marines' size against them, staying inside their reach, where their power armor became a limitation rather than an advantage. The Leviathan axe carved through ceramite plating with each strike, frost spreading across the wounds and making the armor brittle. When a Space Marine tried to grab him with enhanced strength that could crush stone, Kratos let the blades coil around the warrior's arm and pulled, using the Marine's own momentum to slam him into his battle brothers. But these were not ordinary soldiers. These were the Adeptus Astartes, humanity's finest weapons, and they adapted. Mordrin barked orders in rapid Gothic, and the squad shifted formation. 2 Marines with flamers moved to flanking positions, while bolter-armed brothers provided suppressing fire. They fought as a unit, covering each other's weaknesses, creating kill zones that would have shredded any normal opponent. Kratos was far from normal. A gout of promethium flame washed over him from the left. The fire clung like liquid, designed to burn through armor and flesh alike. Kratos' tattoo flared crimson as ancient rage surged through him, but he controlled it, kept the Spartan rage leashed for now. Instead, he recalled the Leviathan axe with a thought. The weapon flew through the air, trailing frost, and embedded itself in the Flamer Marine's chest just as the blades of chaos swept out to intercept the second Flamer's stream. Hellfire met Prometheum in an explosion of competing energies that blew out the cathedral's remaining stained glass windows. The momentary destruction cost him. A bolter round caught Kratos in the shoulder, the explosive shell detonating against his divine flesh. Pain, real pain, bloomed as shrapnel tore through muscle. He grunted, rolled with the impact, came up with the Leviathan axe recalled to his hand, and buried it in the shooter's helmet. The Space Marine dropped, his enhanced brain matter freezing before it could spill. Mordrin came in fast, Chainblade screaming. This time Kratos met him head-on, catching the chainsword between the blades of chaos and twisting. The teeth shrieked as they ground against chains forged in the depths of Hades itself. For a moment, Godkiller and gene-enhanced super soldier stood locked, testing each other's strength. "What are you?" Mordrin growled through his helmet's vox grill. "No daemon fights like this. No mortal could withstand our fury." Kratos' gray face was inches from Mordrin's red helmet. "I am what comes after God's fall." He headbutted the Space Marine hard enough to crack the ceramite faceplate. As Mordrin staggered back, Kratos unleashed the blades in a whirlwind of hellfire and chain. The remaining Space Marines closed ranks, but Kratos had momentum now. The Leviathan axe sang through the air, freezing blood and shattering armor. Bodies in power armor, worth more than entire planetary economies, fell like felled trees. Then the cathedral doors opened again, and everything changed. She entered in robes of ecclesiastical authority, flanked by cherubs, grotesque things that Kratos' eyes struggled to accept. Flying infant-shaped servitors with augmetic implants, their innocent faces contrasted with whirring mechanical components. The woman herself radiated power of a different kind, not physical strength, but the weight of absolute faith given form. A canoness of the Adepta Sororitaris, the Emperor's holy warriors. "Enough," she said, and her voice carried across the battlefield with supernatural clarity. Kratos did not lower his weapons, but something in her tone made him pause. This was not another fanatic screaming about heresy. This woman had the bearing of one accustomed to command, yes, but also the weariness of someone who had seen too much death. "I am Canoness Jessica of the Order of the Bloody Rose, and you are either the most elaborate demon incursion I have witnessed in 40 years of service, or something else entirely." Her eyes, sharp, calculating, studied him with an intensity that reminded Kratos uncomfortably of Athena. "Your weapons burn with hellfire, yet you show tactical restraint. You slaughter the faithful, yet you pause before killing wounded soldiers. Daemons do not hesitate." Mordrin, his faceplate cracked and bleeding, raised his bolter toward Kratos. "Canoness, this creature has desecrated." "I have eyes, Sergeant. I also have questions that your chainsword cannot answer." Kratos' grip on the Leviathan axe tightened. This woman unsettled him in ways the Space Marines had not. She looked at him and saw beyond the gray skin and the weapons of divine power. She saw something that made her curious rather than fearful. "What are you?" she asked, echoing Mordrin's question, but without the hostility. "Where do you come from, and why do you bear the marks of both daemon and saint?" Before Kratos could respond, the air itself screamed. Reality tore open like rotted fabric, and through the wound and space poured something that even the Spartan tensed. The temperature dropped as color drained from the world. Laughter, cruel, playful, mad, echoed from everywhere and nowhere. Demons, true daemons of the warp, lesser entities, their forms constantly shifting between nightmare configurations, but behind them, Kratos felt it, vast presences watching through the tear in reality, beings of such power that they made the Olympians seem almost quaint. The Chaos Gods had tasted the God-killer's essence. A daemon coalesced into something resembling solid form. Too many limbs, too many eyes, flesh that wept reality-warping corruption. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of the damned. Kratos, ghost of Sparta, killer of Ares, slayer of Zeus, destroyer of Olympus. Our masters have tasted your essence through the warp's currents. Such delicious rage, such exquisite guilt, such exquisite potential for glorious damnation. The Space Marines opened fire immediately. Bolter rounds tore through demonic flesh, but the wounds closed almost instantly. Holy Promethium from the Canoness's blessed flamer forced the lesser daemons back, but more poured through the rift. Kratos felt something stir in his chest, the Spartan rage responding to the demonic presence, to the threat, to the implication in the daemon's words. These so-called chaos gods thought they could tempt him, corrupt him. He had rejected godhood itself. He had walked away from Olympus in ruins. He had chosen his son over power. But another part of him, the part that remembered Ares's manipulation, Zeus's tyranny, the gods' casual cruelty, whispered darker thoughts. These chaos entities were honest about their nature. They didn't pretend to be righteous while demanding worship. They didn't build empires of suffering while calling it divine will. The daemon seemed to sense his thoughts. The emperor demands absolute obedience. We offer absolute freedom. He chains humanity in ignorance and fear. We would show them truth, painful, ecstatic, transformative truth. You who broke the chains of Olympus, would you not break these chains as well? Do not listen, Canoness Jessica's voice cut through the daemon's honeyed words. The ruinous powers speak only lies. They promise freedom, but deliver only slavery to madness. Kratos looked between the Canoness, whose faith burned so bright it was almost visible, and the daemon, whose very existence was corruption given form. Two sides of a cosmic war that had raged for 10,000 years, and both wanted him to choose. The Spartan made his choice. I have heard promises from gods before. I have been manipulated by divine powers who claim to offer wisdom, freedom, vengeance. Always they served only themselves. He raised the Leviathan axe toward the daemon. You are no different. The daemon's amusement curdled into rage. Then you shall learn the price of refusing the dark god's generosity. The rift widened, more daemons poured through, and behind them, reality itself began to warp. The cathedral stones ran like water. Statues of the emperor twisted into obscene configurations. The very laws of physics screamed under the warp's influence. Kratos felt it then, the full weight of chaos pressing against his mind. Whispers in languages older than mankind, promises of power and vengeance, visions of the Imperium burning, images of his son Atreus twisted by corruption. The Chaos Gods were testing him, probing for weakness, seeking the crack in his psyche through which they could pour their influence. They found only granite will forged in the fires of regret and tempered by hard-won wisdom. "I denied Athena her power," Kratos growled, as the Spartan rage finally slipped its leash. His gray skin darkened, his tattoo blazed like fresh blood, and his eyes became pits of ancient fury. "I defied Zeus himself and tore down Olympus. You think your corruption can touch me?" The blades of chaos erupted with hellfire that burned hotter than it ever had in his own universe. The Leviathan axe's frost spread with enough intensity to crack the reality-warped stone, and Kratos launched himself at the demonic horde with the singular focus of a man who had already destroyed one pantheon and would not hesitate to begin on another. Behind him, Canoness Jessica watched with wide eyes as the gray-skinned warrior tore through daemons with brutal efficiency, his weapons finding weak points in their unnatural flesh that even blessed bolter rounds struggled to exploit. She made a decision that would echo across the sector. "Cease fire!" she commanded the Space Marines. "In the name of the God Emperor, I declare temporary ceasefire. This warrior fights our enemy. Whatever he is not our foe this day." Mordrin's protest died in his throat as he watched Kratos rip a daemon's essence apart with his bare hands, the creature's death scream causing reality to snap back into place around them. The rift had closed, the daemons were banished, but the cathedral was a ruin of twisted architecture and spilled blood, both mortal and demonic. The ghost of Sparta turned to face the Canoness and her warriors, weapons still ready. "Now," Canoness Jessica said with careful neutrality, "perhaps we can discuss this like rational beings. You have questions about this universe. I have questions about you. And somewhere in those questions may lie the answer to what role you will play in the Emperor's grand design." Kratos' laugh was bitter. "I play no role in any god's design." "Then we have much to discuss, because in the Imperium of Man, everyone serves the Emperor's will, whether they acknowledge it or not. The question is whether you serve as ally or threat to be eliminated." Kratos met her gaze, seeing calculation behind faith, seeing strategy beneath devotion. This woman was dangerous in ways that transcended physical threat. She would be an enemy or an asset, but never someone to be dismissed. "I will hear your words, but I make no promises." "In the 41st millennium," Canoness Jessica replied, "that is more than most offer." The Canoness led Kratos through the ruins of Ophelia VII's capital city, and with each step the Spartan understood more about the nightmare into which he had fallen. This was not a world at war. It was a world that had known nothing but war for generations. Every building was a fortress. Every citizen bore the haunted look of those who lived under constant threat. Children played in the shadow of anti-aircraft batteries. Prayers to the Emperor were carved into every surface, as if faith alone could hold back the darkness. They descended into a sub-level sanctuary beneath the Canoness's commandery, a space designed for interrogation and contemplation in equal measure. The walls were bare except for a single massive Aquila, the two-headed eagle that served as the Imperium's symbol. Kratos recognized the psychology immediately. This was a room designed to make occupants feel the weight of imperial authority. It had no effect on him. "You fought demons," Jessica began, removing her helm to reveal a face marked by acid scars and a bionic eye that glowed with faint amber light. She was younger than her voice suggested, perhaps 40 standard years, but her eyes held centuries of experience. You fought demons, not as one touched by chaos, but as one who has fought such entities before. That should be impossible. The warp is unique to our reality. Kratos leaned against the wall, arms crossed, the blades of chaos resting quiet against his forearms. The Leviathan axe hung from his belt, frost still smoking from its edge. I have fought gods and monsters across multiple realms. Your demons are different in form, but not in nature. They are corruption given flesh, serving powers that feed on mortal suffering. The Chaos Gods, Jessica said, her voice hardening. Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, the ruinous powers that have plagued humanity since before the Emperor walked among us. You rejected their offer. Why? Because I have heard such offers before, Kratos replied. His mind flickered to Ares, to the deal he'd made in desperation that had cost him everything. Gods promise power, freedom, vengeance. They deliver only chains painted in different colors. Jessica studied him with her augmented eye, and Kratos sensed technological analysis, some kind of scanning device built into the implant. You are not human, yet not entirely inhuman. Your physiology defies our understanding. The Magos biologist would dissect you given the opportunity. She paused. I will not give them that opportunity, not yet. Tell me, what are you? I was a Spartan warrior. I became a god. I killed that god and the pantheon he served. Then I walked away from divinity itself. His gray face remained expressionless. In your terms, I am what remains when godhood is rejected. The canoness absorbed this with remarkable composure. You claim to have killed gods, plural, and yet you stand here, mortal enough to bleed. She gestured to his shoulder, where the bolter wound had already begun to heal, but still showed torn flesh. The Emperor is the only true divine power humanity serves. All others are either Xenos filth or warp-spawned abominations. Your Emperor, Kratos said, and his tone made Jessica's hand drift toward her bolt pistol. Tell me of him. I have seen his statues, heard his name in every prayer. Where is this god who demands such devotion? He sits on the golden throne on holy Terra. For 10,000 years he has guided humanity, his psychic might holding back the tides of chaos, his wisdom illuminating our path through the darkness. He is the master of mankind, the anathema to chaos, the god emperor of... Where is he now? Kratos interrupted. Not in history, now, in this moment. Jessica's jaw tightened. The Emperor works through his servants, through the Adeptus Astartes, through the ecclesiastically, through all who serve in his name. His will is... So he does not walk among you, does not speak directly, does not manifest. Kratos' eyes narrowed. I have seen this before. Gods who demand worship but offer only silence. Gods who rule through priests and prophecy rather than presence. You blaspheme, Jessica said, but there was no heat in the accusation, only weariness. And yet, I have asked similar questions in the darkness of my own prayers. The Emperor is silent, has been silent for millennia, but his works endure. The Astronomicon guides our ships. His will manifests through saints and miracles. Absence of voice does not mean absence of presence. Kratos grunted. Or it means the god is dead, and the empire continues on momentum and faith alone. The bolter pistol cleared its holster in a blur. Jessica aimed it at Kratos' head with rock-steady hands. "You threaten me for speaking truth you already suspect. That is not faith, that is fear." For a long moment they stared at each other, warrior to warrior, killer to killer. Then Jessica lowered the weapon. "I am afraid," she said quietly. "Afraid that everything I have fought for, everyone I have watched die, every world I have seen burn in the Emperor's name might be for nothing, might be for a corpse on a throne kept alive by machinery and the deaths of 1,000 psychers every day." She holstered the pistol. "But even if he is truly dead, the Imperium he built is all that stands between humanity and the horrors of the galaxy. Orcs would devour us, Tyranids would consume us, the Eldar would manipulate us, and chaos would damn us for eternity." "So you serve a system," Kratos said. "I serve humanity's survival," Jessica corrected. "In a galaxy that wants us extinct, faith is a weapon as real as any bolter. Belief gives soldiers courage to die fighting. Hope keeps civilians from surrendering to despair. The Emperor, dead or alive, is the symbol that unites 1,000,000 worlds against annihilation." Kratos understood that logic. He had fought for Sparta, for his fellow soldiers, even when he'd lost faith in the gods they worshipped. But he also remembered where that path led. To manipulation by Ares, to the murder of his family, to becoming a weapon for divine ambition. "And those who will not serve? Those who reject your Emperor's system?" Kratos asked. Jessica's face hardened. "They are purged. Xenos, heretics, traitors, all threats to humanity's survival are eliminated. We call it necessary. We call it righteous." She met his eyes. "You would call it familiar, I think. Your history is written in blood." "Yes," Kratos admitted, "which is why I know where this ends. I have seen empires built on fear and faith. They devour their own children in the name of protection. They become the monsters they claim to fight." "Perhaps," Jessica conceded. "But what is the alternative? The Chaos Gods offer only damnation. The Xenos offer only subjugation or extinction. At least the Imperium offers humans a chance to survive, even at terrible cost." Before Kratos could respond, alarm shrieked through the commandery. Red emergency lighting bathed the chamber. The Canoness's vox bead crackled with panicked reports. "Canoness, multiple warp signatures manifesting across the city. It's a coordinated incursion, 1,000 sun sorcerers leading demonic cohorts. They're targeting the cathedral ruins where the stranger first appeared." Jessica was moving before the report finished, snapping orders through her vox bead. "Mobilize all available sisters, contact the Blood Angel garrison, establish prayer ward perimeters around civilian shelters." She glanced back at Kratos. "The Chaos forces are here for you. The 1,000 Sons are knowledge seekers, sorcerers who served Tzeentch, the Chaos god of change and manipulation. They want to study you, dissect you, learn how a god-slayer's essence might be weaponized." Kratos' hand went to the Leviathan axe. "Then they will learn the same lesson Ares did." "This is not your fight," Jessica said, but there was hope in her voice rather than conviction. "Chaos made it my fight when they tried to corrupt me," Kratos replied. He moved toward the door, then paused. But I fight for my reasons, not yours, not for your emperor, not for your imperium. I fight because I choose to, and because I will not be anyone's weapon again." Jessica nodded slowly. "Then we are temporarily aligned. That will have to be enough." She activated her vox. "All forces, this is Canoness Jessica. The Grey Warrior is granted provisional ally status. Do not engage unless he turns hostile. Repeat, do not engage the God-Killer." As they ascended from the sanctuary, Kratos could already hear the sounds of battle erupting across Ophelia 7. Explosions, screams, the chittering laughter of daemons, and the chanting of sorcerers weaving reality-warping spells. The Chaos Forces had come in strength, and they had come for him. Emerging into a war-torn cityscape, warp fire consumed entire hab blocks. Lesser daemons, horrors of Teench constantly splitting and reforming, capered through the streets, hurling mutagenic flames. And in the sky, standing upon a floating platform of crystallized sorcery, stood a figure in ornate armor decorated with eldritch symbols and ancient texts. The thousand-sun sorcerer's voice boomed across the battlefield, amplified by warpcraft. "Kratos of Sparta! The architect of fate has foreseen your arrival. You are the variable that could tip the great game in any direction. Come, let us unlock the secrets written in your god-slaying soul." Kratos looked up at the sorcerer, at the demonic hordes, at the reality-warping madness spreading across the city. Citizens were being transformed into hideous mutations by warp energy. Sisters of Battle fought desperately to hold prayer ward perimeters, their faith literally manifesting as protective barriers. Space Marines dropped from gunships, bolters blazing, but the Chaos Forces kept coming. The Spartan rage stirred in his chest, but Kratos kept it controlled. This was not Olympus. This was not his war, but Chaos had made it personal. They sought to use him, to dissect him, to turn him into another weapon in their eternal game against the Emperor. Kratos would not be used, not again, never again. "Canoness," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "your warriors fight well, but they fight with tactics designed for mortal enemies. Daemons are different. They feed on fear and despair. They are wounded by conviction and certainty." He speaks as one who has fought such entities extensively. "I destroyed a pantheon, gods and daemons both." He raised the Leviathan axe. "Show me where the sorcerer's power is strongest. That is where I will strike." A grim smile crossed the canoness's face. "The cathedral ruins. They're using it as an anchor point for their incursion. Our forces cannot push through the warp corruption. Then I will make a path." He began walking toward the cathedral, the blades of chaos igniting with hellfire, the Leviathan axe gathering frost that made the air around him shimmer. Behind him, Jessica watched the God-Killer stride into the heart of the demonic incursion, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something else than grim determination. She felt hope. The path to the cathedral was a corridor of madness given form. Reality itself had become negotiable. Buildings phased between states of matter, gravity reversed and inverted without pattern, and the screaming citizens caught in the warp storm aged decades in seconds or reverted to infancy. Kratos moved through it like a man walking against a hurricane, his divine essence an anchor of certainty in a sea of change. The Thousand Sons had made a fundamental miscalculation. They believed Kratos' god-killing power came from his weapons or his physical might. It didn't. It came from his absolute, unyielding will, the same will that had allowed him to climb from the underworld 3 times, to defy fate itself, to choose his own path even when gods demanded otherwise. The warp sought to unmake him, to rewrite his existence into something useful to Tzeentch's grand designs. It failed. Each step forward, Kratos imposed order through sheer force of presence. Where his boots touched corrupted ground, reality solidified. Where the blades of chaos swept through mutagenic flame, the fire reverted to ordinary combustion and died. The Leviathan axe carved through demonic flesh, and the wounds didn't regenerate. The frost magic somehow bypassed the warp's healing properties, anchoring the damage in real space. Lesser horrors swarmed him, their forms constantly splitting. Blue horrors dividing into brimstone horrors, each one hurling warp fire with gleeful malice. Kratos met them with calculated brutality. The blades whirled in patterns learned from 1,000 battlefields, each strike landing where a demon's essence concentrated before it split. He wasn't just killing them, he was preventing their division, targeting the metaphysical weak points that even the demons themselves didn't fully understand. A flamer of Tzeentch materialized before him, its maw unhinging to release a torrent of reality-warping flames. Kratos recalled the Leviathan axe mid-throw, the weapon returning to his hand just in time to block the attack. Frost met warpfire in an explosion of competing impossibilities. The demon shrieked as its essence began to freeze, something that should not have been possible for a creature of living flame. "You are an anathema," the demon hissed as ice crystals spread through its immaterial form. "Not anathema like he who sits on gold, but anathema to existence itself. What are you?" Kratos ripped the axe sideways, bisecting the demon through its core. The demon, "I am the end of false gods." Behind him, sisters of battle fought to maintain the perimeter, their faith shields flickering under demonic assault. Canoness Jessica led a squad forward, bolt pistol and power sword cutting a path through lesser demons, but even her considerable skill couldn't match the sheer momentum of Kratos' advance. She had fought for 40 years. She had never seen anything move through chaos corruption with such contemptuous ease. The sorcerer on his floating platform watched with growing agitation. His ornate helmet, decorated with ancient scrollwork and the ever-changing symbols of Tzeentch, tilted as psychic vision analyzed the approaching warrior. What he saw disturbed him enough to break decades of careful composure. "Brothers," the sorcerer's voice crackled across the Vox, addressing other Thousand Sons positioned throughout the ruins. "The Spartan is not merely resistant to warp influence, he is a null void to our patron's touch. Tzeentch's sight slides off him like water from adamantium. He exists outside the great schemer's vision." This was true, and not quite accurate. Kratos wasn't immune to the warp. The Chaos Gods could perceive him, tempt him, even harm him, but his soul, forged in the crucible of Greek divinity and tempered by Norse magic, operated on fundamentally different principles than anything native to this universe. He was a foreign element the warp couldn't fully integrate, an equation that didn't resolve, a prophecy that couldn't be read. Kratos reached the cathedral outer courtyard where the warp storm was the strongest. Here the sorcerer had erected his anchor point, a massive ritual circle drawn in the blood of sacrificed civilians, surrounded by 8 captured psychics bound to stone pillars. The psychics screamed as their minds were forced open, channeling warp energy into the material realm. Their pain fueled the incursion, their torment widening the rift between realities. The ghost of Sparta had seen this before. Different methods, same principle. The gods of Olympus had bound Prometheus to a rock for daring to help humanity. Zeus had created suffering as entertainment. The specifics changed, but divine cruelty remained constant across universes. "Release them," Kratos demanded, his voice cutting through the warp storm's howl. The sorcerer laughed, the sound distorted by both his helmet's vox grill and layers of psychic manipulation. "You think to give orders here in a space I have consecrated to the Lord of Change? I am Azek Sennacherib, exalted sorcerer of the Thousand Suns. I have walked the crystal labyrinth itself. I have read texts written in languages that exist only in futures that may never be. And you, curious anomaly that you are, will be my greatest study." Sennacherib raised his force staff, the weapon crackling with accumulated psychic energy. Around the courtyard, rubric marines, the cursed Ottoman soldiers of the Thousand Suns, reduced to dust inside ornate armor, raised their inferno bolters. Warp fire and bolt rounds converged on Kratos from 8 directions simultaneously. Kratos activated his Spartan rage. The transformation was instant and terrifying. His gray skin darkened to charcoal, the red tattoo blazed like fresh blood, and his eyes became pits of primal fury that had ended pantheons. But this wasn't mindless berserker madness. Kratos had learned control in the frozen wastes of Midgard, had tempered his rage into a tool rather than a curse. The power flooded through him, amplifying strength and speed to divine levels, but his tactical mind remained sharp. He moved like lightning given flesh. The Leviathan axe became a blur of frost and steel, deflecting bolt rounds mid-flight. The blades of chaos extended on their chains to impossible lengths, wrapping around rubric marines and crushing their armor like parchment. Each strike was economy perfected, no wasted motion, no unnecessary flourish, just brutal efficiency elevated to an art form. A flamer of Tzeentch tried to engage in melee. Kratos caught the blade between the blade's chains, yanked the warrior off balance, and drove the Leviathan axe through its ornate helmet. The rubric marine didn't scream. It couldn't, being merely animated dust, but it collapsed into a pile of ash and empty armor. Sennacherib's psychic assault came next. Bolts of pure warp energy, each one capable of boiling a space marine's brain inside his helmet, lanced toward Kratos. Kratos didn't dodge. He endured. The warp lightning struck his rage-empowered form and scattered, not deflected, not absorbed, but scattered as if striking something too dense, too real, too anchored in physical law to be fully affected by the immaterium's touch. Impossible. Sennacherib's composure finally cracked. You should be ash. You should be mutation. You should be... Kratos threw the Leviathan axe. The weapon spun through air thick with warp energy, trailing frost that crystallized reality itself. Sennacherib erected a kineshield at the last instant, psychic force meeting Norse magic in a cascade of competing energies. The shield held, barely, but the impact knocked the sorcerer from his floating platform. Kratos was already moving. He recalled the axe, used the blades of chaos swing between collapsing architecture, and reached the fallen sorcerer before Sennacherib could fully recover. The Spartan's boot came down on the sorcerer's chest, cracking ceramite and pinning him to the corrupted ground. "The Psykers," Kratos growled. "Free them." Sennacherib's helmet speakers crackled with something between a laugh and a cough. "You don't understand. Kill me and the ritual inverts. The psychic backlash will cook their minds. Free them and the anchor point destabilizes, tears open a permanent warp rift. You cannot win this." Kratos' jaw tightened. A no-win scenario engineered by chaos manipulation. The gods loved such traps, damnation disguised as choice. But Kratos had learned from his mistakes. He'd learned from Pandora's sacrifice, from Faye's wisdom, from every time divine powers had tried to force his hand. He looked at the 8 Psykers, saw their agony, saw their inevitable deaths. Then he looked at the warp rift, saw the endless tide of demons waiting to pour through, saw the death of everyone on this world if the anchor point stabilized. Sometimes there were no good choices, only choices you could live with. "Canoness!" Kratos bellowed across the courtyard. Jessica, fighting her way through rubric marines, turned at his call. "The moment I break this circle, get your people away from the cathedral. The backlash will be catastrophic." Understanding flashed across her scarred face. She began barking orders into her vox, pulling sisters back, establishing fallback positions. Sennacherib's laughter turned manic. "You would sacrifice them, the innocents! How delightfully grimdark! Perhaps you belong in this universe after all." "No," Kratos said coldly. "I would give them a warrior's death instead of a sorcerer's torture." He raised the Leviathan axe high. The Psykers, even through their agony, seemed to understand. One, a woman whose eyes had burned away from psychic strain, managed to mouth 2 words. "Thank you." Kratos brought the axe down on the ritual circle's primary glyph. The effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The contained warp energy, suddenly released without its anchors, exploded outward in a sphere of psychic devastation. The 8 Psykers died instantly. Their suffering finally ended. The warp rift destabilized, collapsing in on itself with a sound like reality screaming. Demons caught in the backlash were yanked back into the immaterium mid-manifestation, their frustrated howls echoing across dimensions. But the explosion of psychic energy had to go somewhere. It washed over Kratos like a tsunami of pure thought and emotion. 10,000 screaming voices, visions of futures that might never be. The touch of Tynch's vast and terrible consciousness briefly focused on this single point in space-time. The Spartan rage kept him anchored, barely. He felt the gods' attention like a physical weight, felt tentacles of influence trying to wrap around his psyche, felt whispers promising power and knowledge and understanding of every mystery in every universe. Kratos rejected it all with the same iron will that had let him walk away from godhood. The psychic storm passed. The warp rift sealed completely. The cathedral courtyard was silent except for the crackle of dying warp fire and the settling of rubble. Kratos released his Spartan rage, the power receding back to its ember state. His body ached. Even divine flesh had limits, and this universe was testing them. He looked down at Sennacherib, who lay broken beneath his boot. The helmet cracked, revealing desiccated flesh beneath, the price paid by all Thousand Sons for their sorcerous knowledge. But Sennacherib's remaining eye held triumph rather than defeat. "Did it," the sorcerer whispered. "I learned what I came to learn. You are no demon, no Xenos, no creation of this universe at all. You are something new, something our patron could not predict, and that is the most valuable knowledge of all. The great game has a new piece on the board. How it will move, even Tynch cannot see." Then Canon's Jessica approached, her armor scorched and dented, her squad reduced by half. She looked at the 8 dead Psykers, at the sealed warp rift, at Kratos standing amid the aftermath of powers that should have annihilated any mortal being. "You killed them," she said, not an accusation, an observation. "I ended their suffering," Kratos corrected. "There is a difference. In the Imperium, we call that mercy. We grant it rarely, but we understand its necessity." She holstered her bolt pistol. The Kamos incursion is broken. Ophelia 7 is secure. You have proven yourself in battle against the arch-enemy. By imperial law, you have earned a hearing before higher authority. I want no hearing. I want answers about your emperor, about why this entire galaxy seems locked in eternal war, about whether any of this suffering serves a purpose beyond perpetuating itself. Canon's Jessica's bionic eye whirred, analyzing, calculating. Then she made a decision that would alter the course of events across multiple sectors. "Then you will have your answers. I am calling in a favor owed by an inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus. She has access to records even the ecclesiastiki does not acknowledge. She has questions about the emperor's true nature that border on heresy." The canoness's scarred face was grave. "If anyone can show you the truth behind the Imperium's lies and glories alike, it is Inquisitor Covenant. But be warned, truth in the first millennium is often more terrible than any fiction." Kratos looked up at the smoke-filled sky of Ophelia 7, at the city slowly recovering from chaos assault, at the statues of the Emperor still standing amid the ruins. Somewhere beyond the stars, on a world called Terra, sat the Emperor himself, or his corpse, the being whose faith-powered empire had fought chaos for 10,000 years. The ghost of Sparta had killed Zeus, had torn down Olympus, had rejected godhood and walked away, but he had never confronted a god who might already be dead, yet still ruled an empire spanning millions of worlds. Then take me to your Inquisitor. Let her show me these truths, and then I will decide what role, if any, I play in this millennium's wars. As Imperial ships arrived to evacuate the wounded and begin reconstruction, none of the survivors, not the Sisters of Battle, not the Blood Angels, not even the shell-shocked civilians, could have known that they had witnessed the beginning of something unprecedented. A god-killer had entered the 41st millennium, and the balance of power between the Emperor, chaos, and humanity's future had shifted in ways that even Tzeentch, architect of change itself, could not fully predict.
The inquisitorial vessel Unyielding Truth hung in the void above Ophelia 7 like a dagger pointed at creation's throat. Kratos stood in its observation deck, watching the shrine world recede into the star-scattered darkness, and felt the familiar weight of cosmic scale pressing against his perception. Different stars, different gods, same endless war. Inquisitor Covenant arrived without ceremony, a woman of perhaps 60 standard years, her augmetic left arm crackling with barely contained power, her eyes sharp enough to dissect souls. She wore the rosette of her office like a weapon rather than a badge, and when she looked at Kratos, he recognized a fellow killer trying to determine if violence would be necessary. Canoness Jessica's report was illuminating, Covenant said, her voice carrying the clipped precision of someone who measured words like ammunition. A gray-skinned warrior appears from nowhere, slaughters a squad of space marines, fights daemons with proficiency that suggests extensive experience, resists chaos corruption, and displays abilities that defy our understanding of both physics and the warp. She circled him slowly, augmetic fingers flexing. The Ordo Malleus wants you vivisected, the Adeptus Mechanicus wants you dissected, the Ecclesiarchy wants you sanctified or burned, they haven't decided which. I convince them all to give me 48 hours to determine what you actually are. And if you decide I am a threat? Kratos asked. Covenant smiled without humor. Then I activate the cyclonic torpedoes currently locked on this ship's position, and we all die in holy nuclear fire. The Inquisition does not take chances with potential galaxy-ending anomalies. She gestured to a hololithic display showing the Imperium's scope, 1,000,000 worlds, countless billions of souls, all bound by faith and fear. So let us not waste time with posturing. You want truth about the Emperor, I want truth about you. We trade. Kratos respected directness. Ask. Where do you come from? And I don't mean which planet or sector. You are not of this universe. The warp reacts to you like antibodies attacking a foreign substance. What reality spawned you? A universe where gods walked openly, Kratos replied, where they demanded worship, played games with mortal lives, and enforced their will through divine power. I was a warrior who served them. Then I became their weapon. Then I became their destroyer. He met Covenant's gaze. I killed the gods of my world and walked away from the ashes of their pantheon. The Inquisitor's augmetic hand twitched, whether from surprise or malfunction, Kratos couldn't tell. You killed gods, multiple gods, and survived? I did more than survive. I chose mortality over divinity. I chose to be a father instead of a weapon. Kratos' voice carried the weight of those choices. Your turn, Inquisitor. Tell me about your Emperor. Not the propaganda, the truth. Covenant was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with conditioning that made even thinking certain thoughts dangerous. Finally, she activated the hololithic display. An image appeared, a golden figure, impossibly tall, radiating light that made even the hologram difficult to look at directly. The Emperor of Mankind, Covenant said, born in ancient Terra's prehistory through the Gestalt sacrifice of thousands of human shamans who foresaw humanity's need for protection against chaos, or so the official doctrine claims. The truth, she manipulated the display, showing images from various ages, the Emperor as warlord, as scientist, as God-king. The truth is, we don't actually know. His origins are lost to time and deliberate obfuscation. What we know is that approximately 30,000 years before your arrival, he emerged to unite humanity. The display shifted, showing the Great Crusade, humanity's expansion across the stars, led by genetically engineered demigods called Primarchs. He created 20 sons from his own genetic material, superhuman generals who would lead his armies to reclaim the galaxy for mankind. For 2 centuries, the Imperium expanded at a pace unprecedented in human history. Then the display darkened. But half of his sons were corrupted by chaos, the Horus Heresy, a civil war that nearly destroyed everything. The Emperor was mortally wounded, defeating his most beloved son, Horus. For 10,000 years since, he has sat on the Golden Throne, a life support system that requires the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers daily to maintain. Kratos studied the images of the enthroned emperor, a corpse kept alive by machinery and psychic sacrifice, unable to speak, unable to move, yet somehow still projecting power across the galaxy. "He is dead," Kratos said. "Biologically, perhaps, but his psychic presence remains. The Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse that guides our ships through the warp, emanates from his throne. Saints manifest miracles in his name. His will seems to act through the tarot and other means of divination." Covenant's expression was conflicted. Is he a god, a corpse, something in between? We don't know. What we know is that without him, or at least without faith in him, the Imperium would collapse into 1,000 civil wars and be devoured by Xenos and Chaos alike. "So you worship a corpse because the alternative is worse," Kratos said. "We worship hope," Covenant corrected sharply. "In a galaxy where Tyranids swarm from beyond the galactic rim to consume all biomass, where Necrons wake from millions of years of sleep with technology that makes ours look like cave paintings, where the orcs breed through violence and grow stronger with every battle, where the Eldar's arrogance birthed a chaos god that nearly destroyed them, and where chaos itself offers eternal damnation disguised as freedom. Yes, we worship hope, even if that hope is maintained by the corpse of a being who might have been the greatest tyrant or the greatest savior humanity ever produced." Kratos absorbed this, seeing parallels to his own history. Zeus had ruled through fear and violence. The Emperor had tried to rule through reason and force. Both had created empires that devoured their own children. Both had fought wars that never truly ended. "The Chaos Gods," Kratos said. "Tell me their nature." Covenant's expression darkened. "They are not gods in any traditional sense. They are Pisic reflections of mortal emotion given form and consciousness in the warp. Khorne, blood, war, rage. Tzeentch, change, schemes, ambition. Nurgle, decay, despair, entropy. Slaanesh, excess, pleasure, perfection." She paused. "They feed on the emotions that spawned them. Khorne grows stronger with every act of violence. Tzeentch with every plot and manipulation. Nurgle with every resignation to hopelessness, Slanesh with every indulgence and obsession. They cannot be killed because the emotions that sustain them are intrinsic to sentient life. I have fought such entities, Kratos said, remembering the furies, the demons of guilt and vengeance that had pursued him. They can be resisted, denied, starved. But at what cost? Covenant asked. To truly starve Khorne, we would need to eliminate all violence, impossible in a galaxy at war. To starve Tzeentch, we would need to eliminate all ambition and change, stagnation and death. To starve Nurgle, we would need to eliminate all despair in the 41st millennium. To starve Slanesh, we would need to eliminate all desire for excellence and pleasure. Existence would become meaningless. She shook her head. The Chaos Gods are parasites feeding on consciousness itself. We can only resist them, not destroy them. Kratos was silent, processing this. In his universe, the gods had been beings with physical forms, however powerful. They could be found, fought, killed. But these chaos gods were concepts given malevolent will. How did one kill an idea? How did one destroy an emotion? The Emperor knew this, Covenant continued. His imperial truth, the doctrine that there are no gods, only powerful Xenos and warp entities, was an attempt to starve chaos through disbelief. It failed. Humans cannot help but feel rage, ambition, despair, desire. And in this universe, those feelings literally empower our enemies. Her augmetic hand clenched. So we fight. We hold the line. We sacrifice billions to save trillions. We commit atrocities to prevent apocalypse. And we tell ourselves that the Emperor, in whatever form he currently exists, guides us toward survival.
Toward survival. You sound uncertain, Kratos observed. I am an inquisitor, Covenant replied. Certainty is for the faithful. I deal in questions too dangerous for most minds. She leaned forward. Now you understand our nightmare. What do you intend to do? Will you attempt to kill the Emperor as you killed your pantheon? Will you ally with chaos, thinking them honest in their monstrosity? Will you try to forge a third path in a galaxy that has tried every option and found them all wanting? Kratos looked out at the stars again, at the impossible vastness of the Imperium, at the scale of suffering required to maintain it. He thought of his son Atreus, of the lessons they had learned together in Midgard, that the cycle of violence could be broken, that gods could be resisted without becoming monsters yourself, that there were always choices, even when powers greater than yourself tried to force your hand. I will not serve your Emperor, Kratos said finally. I will not kneel to chaos. I will not become a weapon for either side in a war that has consumed galaxies. He turned to face Covenant directly. But I will not abandon those caught between them. I have been a weapon. I have been a monster. I have been a god. I will be none of those things here. Then what will you be? Covenant asked. Something this universe has not seen, Kratos replied. Someone who refuses the false choices your empire and chaos both offer. You say there is no third path. I will find one anyway. Covenant studied him for a long moment, and then did something that surprised even herself. She laughed, not with humor, but with the exhausted relief of someone who had carried a terrible burden alone for too long. Do you know what you sound like? She said. You sound like him, the Emperor, before the throne, before the heresy, when he still walked among us and tried to build a better future through reason and force.
He also refused the false choices. He also thought he could forge a new path. And look where that got him. Look where it got us all. Then I will learn from his failure, Kratos said finally. I have failed before. I have made terrible choices in the name of victory. But I learned. I changed. That is what your chaos gods and your dead emperor both seem to have forgotten. That change does not have to mean corruption. That choice does not have to mean damnation. Before Covenant could respond, alarm screamed through the ship. A junior inquisitor burst onto the observation deck, his face pale with terror. "Inquisitor! Astropathic emergency from the Cadian Gate. The 13th Black Crusade, Abaddon the Despoiler, has broken through the defenses. Cadia stands on the brink of annihilation. The warp storms are spreading, and—" He hesitated, clearly struggling with information too terrible to voice. "And the Astronomicon is flickering. The Emperor's light is failing." Covenant's augmetic hand sparked as she clenched it in fury and fear. "How long do we have?" "Unknown, Inquisitor, but the Imperium is calling for all available forces to converge on Cadia. If it falls, the warp storms could split the galaxy in half. 1 trillion souls will be damned." Kratos felt it then, a psychic shock wave that rippled across the warp, a disturbance so massive that even his foreign soul could sense it. Somewhere far away, on a world he had never seen, the God Emperor's light was dimming, and chaos was preparing to feast on the resulting darkness. The Inquisitor looked at Kratos, and he saw the question in her eyes, the plea she was too proud to voice. "You owe us nothing," Covenant said quietly. "You owe this universe nothing. You could walk away, find some isolated world, live out whatever passes for your lifespan in peace. No one would fault you." "But," Kratos prompted. "But you said you would find a third path, a way between the Emperor's tyranny and chaos's damnation. If such a path exists, perhaps it begins on Cadia. Perhaps it begins with someone who has killed gods, showing us that even in the darkest hour, when everything we have built crumbles, there are still choices beyond despair and destruction." Kratos looked down at his hands, the blades of chaos resting against his forearms, the Leviathan axe hanging at his belt. Weapons that had ended pantheons, weapons that had carved a path through divine tyranny, weapons that, in this universe, might finally serve a purpose beyond revenge. He thought of his son Atreus, of Faye, of every lesson learned through blood and regret, that power without wisdom led to ruin, that vengeance without purpose created only emptiness, that the measure of a warrior was not in whom he destroyed, but in whom he chose to protect. "Take me to Cadia," Kratos said finally. "Show me this war that threatens to damn a galaxy, and I will show you what a god-killer can do when he fights not from rage, but from choice." As the unyielding truth changed course toward the Cadian Gate, toward the largest battle in 10,000 years of Imperial history, Kratos stood in the observation deck and watched the stars streak past. Different stars, different gods, but the same eternal question that had defined his existence since the day he took up weapons in Sparta's name. How much blood must be spilled before peace becomes possible? In the first millennium, he would finally learn the answer, or die trying. The ghost of Sparta had walked many worlds, had toppled pantheons, and rejected godhood itself. But as the unyielding truth hurtled through the warp toward Cadia, where chaos and the Imperium would clash in a battle that would reshape the galaxy, Kratos understood that he had finally found a war worthy of his skill. Not worthy because of its scale, although the scale was beyond even his considerable experience. Worthy because for the first time since climbing from the depths of Hades, he fought not from rage or manipulation, but from genuine choice. The Emperor sat dying on his golden throne, a corpse god whose empire consumed billions to sustain itself. The Chaos Gods writhed in the warp, offering freedom that was only slavery under different masters. Between them, countless trillions suffered and died, ground beneath the wheels of a war without end. Kratos had told Inquisitor Covenant he would find a third path. He had meant it. But as he felt the warp's turbulence during their journey, as he sensed the vast psychic disturbance emanating from Cadia's breaking defenses, he realized the truth. There was no third path. There never had been. The Emperor's reason through force and Chaos's freedom through damnation were merely two flavors of the same poison. What this universe needed was not a new path. It needed someone willing to walk between the paths, to stand in the spaces the gods had declared impossible, to prove through action rather than doctrine that choice itself was the only power worth wielding. On Cadia, Abaddon the Despoiler commanded the largest chaos invasion in Imperial history. On Terra, the Emperor's light flickered and dimmed. Across 1,000,000 worlds, humanity prayed to a god who might already be dead, while that god's enemies promised liberation through damnation. And into this apocalyptic convergence came a gray-skinned warrior, bearing chains forged in Hades and an axe blessed by Norse magic, a god-killer who had learned through 10,000 years of mistakes that the measure of power was not in whom you destroyed, but in whom you chose to protect. The Imperium would try to use him as a weapon. Chaos would try to corrupt him as a champion. Kratos would refuse both, would forge his own purpose in the fires of the galaxy's darkest hour, would prove that even in the 41st millennium, where there is only war, only suffering, only the grinding machinery of divine ambition, one person's choice could matter. Whether that choice would save the Imperium or doom it, whether chaos would weaken it or strengthen it,
Whether the Emperor would approve or condemn it from his dying throne, these questions did not concern the ghost of Sparta. He had killed gods before. If necessary, he would kill them again. But first, he would try something more difficult, more dangerous, more impossible. He would try to save them.